Are we living in an era with more revolutionary change than has been the case during the past? The answer is yes.
All change starts with self. Be the change you want to see in the world.
These are the strengths that somebody with autism, with ADHD or dyslexia could bring to an organisation, bring to your team.
Hello everyone, and welcome to the Business Transformation Network's podcast. The BTN is a thought leadership network that provides transformational content across three main categories: people, process, and technology. This podcast is presented to you by the BTN and their editor and your host, me, Claudia Falzon. All links from this podcast will be provided in a description on iTunes, Spotify, and whichever app you listen to your podcasts on. Today with us we have Jeremy Blain, who is the Chief Executive of Performance Works International. Jeremy is an award-winning international CEO, speaker, and trainer who helps in transforming leaders to accelerate success in the modern workplace. He is also the founder of the best-selling book, The Inner CEO. Let's go ahead and get straight into the podcast. Hi, Jeremy. Thank you for joining us today. So if you could start by just introducing yourself, what you do, and the topic of discussion for our listeners.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Claudia. Jeremy Blain. I'm the CEO of Performance Works International, and that's a company that focuses on helping organizations transform for the future. And that is the topic for today. What's that transformational journey look like at mindset level and at action level? I'm also an author of more than 30 industry papers on the topic, and a book, and my first book, which I was released actually last year, which comes from that and the journey of research that I've done. So it's very much about the modern workplace and how we get things done.
Great, thank you for that, Jeremy. So to begin this discussion, I would like to start by asking, how do the best companies start on their transformation journey?
Wow, you're starting with a big question there, Claudia. Well, it's interesting because, like most things, it starts with mindset and understanding the true nature of transformation. And it's that the way I describe it is when I talk to leaders that perhaps have come from larger organizations, have worked for many years, ask them whether actually they're making decisions based on what they believed and how they learned in the 20th century, or are they being driven by 20th century digital modern era ways and means and new thought processes? And there is a big difference, because we often need a blank slate. The best companies know that it's a tough journey, and that starts with a steep learning curve, usually at executive leader level. And I'm afraid to say that is often where it is failing as well at the moment.
Yeah.
So according to the Strategy Implementation Institute, 63% of normal strategies fail. But when you add digital into the mix, that goes up to over 8 out of 10, according to Forbes, IBM, Oracle Research. And that really hasn't slowed down even since the pandemic, even though digitalization has accelerated. It's as you get into it and trying to implement it is where actually things can go wrong unless it's started in the right way. So if the leaders understand this, if they're on board and acknowledge that they're not the smartest people in the room anymore, then actually it allows for a more collective approach to root and branch transformation. It's inclusive rather than exclusive. So actually, that's how the best companies do it. They understand that it's a journey for the executive leaders as well as the rest of the organization. And that is what has to happen first. It's mindset into action.
Amazing. Thank you for that, Jeremy. And, why does this sometimes not happen or, fail altogether before they get started?
That is a really good question. And the reason is the difference, I believe, between transformation and change. So for those organizations that see it as they talk about constant change in business, change rather than transformation is a problem to solve. It's the past and coming from the past to try and find your own future, rather than what I feel transformation is, which is an opportunity. It's future focused, and it often has a brand new slate with new views being embraced and welcomed. The problem is with being informed by the past is that we can bring the greatest hits, if you like, from the past. But in the rapidly changing speed-driven digital era, transformation is happening at such a pace that there are new things around the corner and we miss things. And it's missing things in terms of learning. And once you miss things in terms of learning, all you have is to refer back to where you've come from. So it becomes a change, and that becomes in a moment. It becomes a problem to solve in a moment, not a long-term solution. So that is one of the biggest reasons why these fail. It's the difference between seeing it through a lens of change rather than what you should be looking at through as whole business transformation, not even just digital transformation or workforce transformation or ways of working. It is whole business transformation.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. Couldn't agree any more with that. And, what do the best transformation leaders do to ensure that obviously their strategy is implemented as well as planned?
There are some great examples out there, and I think the best examples of transformation leaders are those who I really just described, who have come from a career in, if you like, the 20th century. They've built into management and senior leadership roles in the 21st century, and yet they still are on a learning journey. They're still willing and excited to find out what is next and what's around the corner for them. They always ask the question, what if we do something different? What next once we've got this in place? Because they understand the pace of change. Now, a really good example of this is a bank in Singapore called, well, it's Southeast Asia actually, called DBS Bank, and it's been voted for 2 or 3 years on the row now, the world's best digital bank. And the CEO of that bank, Piyush Gupta, kind of talks about a few things. He says that if you want to compete in the 21st century, you've got to embrace the digital and the human touch together and build a new culture around that. And I couldn't agree more. Culture is the center point for organizational change, but also organizational performance as well. That is no different in this fast-paced digital era when perhaps you've got a distributed workforce, you work with more independent workers as well. That culture actually becomes more important to glue it all together. So there are a few key points that Piyush Gupta, the CEO of DBS, talks about. He talks about the technological voyage that the organization is going on and the culture change that is driven about that. It is not about what is my digital strategy, if you like, but it is what is our strategy and culture for the digital era. And he acknowledged that this is a huge learning curve for leaders and managers to embrace. And he is certainly the ones that would hold his hand up and say, you know what? We're not the smartest people in the room. And what he implemented when they were going through this were a number of hackathons where they really put through the paces, the senior leaders and managers, to integrate that human and digital side together and really show them, A, the opportunity, but B, the scale of the task in hand. It wasn't just about digital transformation. Suddenly they realized it was about whole business model shift. And so therefore, what they needed to do, they needed to be, even in a compliance-led institution like a bank, they had to take risks, experiment, take the philosophy of fail early, fail often, and fail forward right through the organization on a platform of psychological safety, so that the organization could move more agile, in a more agile way, fast and flexible, while being customer obsessed and driven, and also being led by data. So making decisions based on data in real time, rather than, let's say, at the end of the year when you're looking at your strategy for the next year. And therefore, not only were they going through transformation, but what he talks about is being champions of continuous change when you're on that journey as well. And he said, you know, one CEO is not enough. You can't do this on your own. It is much better to create leaders at all levels who can help with this, who can step out of their job role and be part of the solution, not be dragged along with what us leaders think is the best thing for us.
Amazing. And what a great example there. And, you know, Jeremy, how do the most inspiring leaders involve themselves in the transformational journey to, engage, motivate, and mobilize others right through the organization?
Well, there's one word in your question which is really central to this, which is involvement or involve. Be it, how do inspiring leaders involve themselves? That's exactly what they do. They involve themselves. So the way that I talk about it is that there is no room anymore for leaders to sit in their ivory tower. Yes, they have got to have their eyes to the sky, but they've got to have their feet on the ground as well. And that really is the difference between the very best transformational leaders and those who also ran. They understand that they've got to get a little bit more operational, and they've got to be focused on implementation, not on defining the what, if you like. The question is shifted at leadership level from the what to the how we get it executed and how we embed the change throughout the organization and the culture of the organization. So the very best understand also that this is the age of human-centered leadership. So while we are speed driven, while we have that digital thread running through the organization, the human touch becomes more important than it ever has been, including that greater purpose of the organization, the impact on the planet, on society, on community, and how attractive that is to employees and prospective employees these days. And they understand how to balance those things with the need still to drive revenue and profit. So they've stopped looking, many of them have actually stopped looking at shareholders as a single entity and started looking at stakeholders in the journey, often starting with employees, then moving to customers, then into shareholders themselves. So that really is about the how. They understand that in order to get that implementation mindset, everybody needs to be involved with the journey.
Absolutely. Thank you, Jeremy. And what would you say, the benefits to the business and to the workforce of having an involved, inspiring, transformational leader who brings others along with them?
All right. Well, let me ask you a question, Claudia, coming right back at you. Okay. So if you think about the very best leaders that you have ever worked with in your career, what defines them? What are their behaviors that you really value? Can you tell me?
Yeah, people who are, understanding and who can, really get to know us personally and take us along the journey with them,
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And that really flows from that previous question about being more human-centered and focusing on your people, really having your feet on the ground. So this is the rise of human-centered leadership, in fact. And I think the number one trait that employees are looking from their leaders and managers coming out of the pandemic was empathy, greater empathy for what they're going through. Would you agree with that?
100%. I mean, obviously, instead of just looking at us as a number, we're individuals, we're human, right? So we have these feelings and we want to be understood and noticed and taken along with that journey as well.
And I feel the passion coming through you from that. Exactly. And it's leaders that understand that there is gold in all of their people, because it's people like you, Claudia, who can say, you know what, I want to be involved in this. I want to lead this as much as you do. I can help transform. There is a narrowing of the gap, the capability gap between, if you like, traditional leaders and the rest of their employees when you consider the new skill sets that are out there. So the digital skills, data-driven, agile working, scrums, collaboration online, virtual meetings, you name it. It's actually a much narrowed gap. So everybody is on a much leveler playing field these days and feel that they can contribute. So actually, when you talk about the benefits of leaders that understand that, and your very best leaders that you talk about there, Claudia, that you've worked for, then they are absolutely fabulous at attracting new people into the organization, retaining people like you who say, these people get it. They really get what we're about as an organization, but they get me and they value what I'm doing. They develop me. They drive loyalty within me in an age where that's really declining. And whether you're a permanent employee, a gig worker, part of an independent contractor, then that's actually the new lenses that leaders today need to look through, because within the next 3 years, 50% of your workforce will be made up of the independent workforce. So that ability to bind at a very human level people together with you on the journey, whether they're permanent, independent, or contractor, is a real skill to fine tune for leaders these days. And that's where I think this inclusive approach, a more collective approach to leadership, rather than exclusive, I'm the boss, I know what the future holds, and I can take you forward, is just not going to work anymore. Is that actually, I don't know. And those courageous leaders who are able to say, I'm holding my hand up, I don't know everything, I'm not the smartest people in the room, but I think you guys can help, is like, let's do it together. And that's the difference.
Yeah. And I think obviously understanding as well is that, it doesn't just help that individual, but also the organization.
Yes, it does help the organization, and it helps the perception of the organization externally. So it starts to grow their employer branding. So if you look at the very best companies that have come out of the pandemic, and even in very traditional industries like luxury, where their shops were, it was all about in-store experience. So if you go to Gucci, for example, a really great example of how they shifted online and how they built even better customer experiences that they didn't even realize, because they'd not fast-tracked that transformation because they were in fear a little bit. But actually what they did is they embraced the rest of the organization and say, look, we're potentially in a bit of trouble here. We've got nobody coming into our stores for at least a year or so, and we don't know how long it's going to go on. What can we do? So if any of the listeners to this podcast are interested in that, go just type in Gucci Live into Google and you'll see what they did. They created in-store experiences online for a group of customers or exclusive high spend customers, and they added surprises. So halfway through kind of going through a particular product or a new exclusive offer for them, they might bring a celebrity from the other side of the world in there, or somebody else from Gucci to explain it. And it would really surprise them. And it grew their conversion rate, even through having this in-store experience. So it's reimagining these things at organizational level, mean that actually you're protecting the company, but then you're exciting the people within your organization and even your customers, which is great, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. And Jeremy, what would you say is the cost of, getting it wrong or failing altogether?
We've got some great examples recently in the UK, haven't we, Claudia,
Exactly.
about that. P&O ferries, I think, could be one of them. The cost, you see, of leaders who have a 20th century lens, going back to what I talked about before, is that they're informed by the past. They make the decisions in a closed room. They don't consult, they don't collaborate, because they don't want to share that bad news. Or they don't want to lose face, let's say, in front of their employees. But what that has done with P&O, that shutout of all of their employees, shows a huge lack of respect. And where employees these days understand that after 2 years of the pandemic, when you don't have any customers coming through and, kind of sailing on your ships, then it's going to be tough out there. But let's consult rather than be told that we're going to be made redundant. And that company now could go under completely, and those leaders will be, kind of, they've even been castigated at, at governmental level. And if you cast your mind back even to the first lockdown in the UK, another company, Britannia Hotels, who sent a letter, I don't know, it's something like the 19th of March, dated the 19th of March, to employees who received it on the 19th of March, saying, right, you need to vacate your free accommodation that you've had. You no longer have a job. Thank you very much. Goodbye. People were left on the streets. And often these were people from Eastern Europe that had come over and been brilliant workers for them, lack of respect. It happened in their Pontins holiday camps as well, when they started opening. Because of how they were perceived of treating staff, they couldn't even get casual labor to clean properly. And many customers found that they had real sanitation problems in the accommodation. And then they had another wave of terrible press in the media about that. And this is, for me, it's unenlightened leaders who are just sat in these ivory towers, who just don't get that this is much more about people, whether it's customers, employees, and even themselves, and doing that journey together.
Exactly. Couldn't agree anymore. And, to finish this discussion with the final question, what would you say are the new leadership traits or skill sets that will be most important for leaders as we consider the decade ahead?
That's a good question. It also links very closely to research that I did last year with a business partner of mine called the Enlightened Leader Research. And we looked at what are the new traits, skills, knowledge, behaviors that are most important. And we didn't just ask leaders about this, we asked employees too. And when we consolidated the feedback from both of them, there were some very strong commonalities that came through. So the first one was a very strong human-centered approach to leadership. The second one was being more empowering of people to create leaders at all levels so that they can contribute to future growth and be much more involved, not just in their job role or based on their job description, but actually to the strategic health of the organization.
Yeah.
But when we then went to leaders themselves and started focusing on them, there was a lot of concurrence in terms of the skill sets, if you like, that are needed. The first one being keeping up with the pace of change and continuing uncertainty. There was a brilliant quote from a company called the Alexander Partnership, and they asked a leader, what is the secret for being a leader in the decade ahead? And they said, and simple sentence was, knowing what to do when you don't know what to do. I absolutely love that. So, and that is that for those of us that are leaders, and I totally get the sentiment there. We have to be great learners. We have to go on a learning journey again. And many learners that I work with, in my view, have forgotten how to learn. And probably need to go on that journey again. That's the first. And then it's about the workforce. It's about adopting digital with a strong human's touch. It's about balancing the needs of all of the stakeholders that are in place, whether it's customers, employees, shareholders, communities within which we serve, etc. Being empowering, as I talked about before, while being sustainability conscious as well, and getting everybody involved in that. Yeah. Demonstrating new working practices, work in agile ways, adopt data-driven decision-making, understand what data visualization means within your organization. Stop going through spreadsheet after spreadsheet. Start embracing AI to unlock the power of the data and make sure that employees are on board with that as well. So not only upskilling yourself, but upskilling the workforce and making sure it's an inclusive, equitable, and diverse workplace so everybody is on the road to the journey with you.
Amazing. Wow. Thank you, Jeremy. I couldn't agree with any more of those points you're making there. Thank you. So I think that sums up our discussion quite nicely, actually. So I just wanted to thank you so much for joining us. It's been an absolute pleasure and a great conversation as well.
Well, thank you very much for having me, Claudia, and I hope your listeners enjoy it.
Thank you, Jeremy. Thank you for listening to our podcast. We really hope you enjoyed it and learned something new. For more content like this, please subscribe to the BTN website. You can reach us on Twitter at thebusinesstn, or alternatively, you can email us at c.thousand@thebtn.tv. We read all emails and will always try to respond as soon as possible. Thanks again for listening and enjoy your day.